Okay, happy 2024. I know it's midway through January, but here we are, my first video in 2024. The last time I shared my painting material was about 4 years ago. So what changed? Well, not much, but still, I changed a studio space, and I realized a few things about paint that I use. So this video will be a good update for you. Hi, this is Eric from Cafe Watercolor. One of the most common questions I got is about the material I use. What brushes, paper, and paint, and how do I set up certain things. While I will always say that these are not the most important factor for a successful painting, having the right tool for the right job is very important because it makes your painting experience better and more enjoyable. So let's talk about my setup first. Ever since I started to paint, I always have a dedicated area for painting. I said it before and I'll say it again, it doesn't have to be big and fancy. You just need a place where all your materials are ready to go. As long as you don't need 30 minutes to clean up and set up everything to start to paint. Any excessive work you need to do just to get started are more mental hurdle for you to overcome. Starting is probably the hardest thing for any painting, so make it easy to get started as you can. My painting area has evolved from a corner of a room to a corner of a garage and now to my tiny house. But aside from a more comfortable experience, the physical size of the space didn't increase all that much. So let's take a look at how I set up the space. Okay, so welcome to my dedicated watercolor space. This is where I do pretty much all of my painting. And as you can see, this is not a large area. Consider how small my tiny house is. And the important thing is to have a dedicated area so you can paint comfortably and all your materials are ready to go whenever you want to paint. This area, like I mentioned, is not that big. It's about 4 feet by 5 feet. So let's take a look at my setup and the equipment that I use. So first of all, the painting service. This is an easel. I got it from Amazon. This is nice and big and very sturdy. I put it right on top of my desk. Now this desk is built in with the tiny house. That being said, any desk would do, just need a big enough space. Now I like to paint tilted and this easel allows me to paint at an angle. I am right now at the lowest tilt angle, so that is about 33 to 35 degrees. And the reason I want to paint tilted is because I can look at my painting very naturally, and at the same time when I am painting a big wash, the wash will flow down very naturally. This will make it easier for me to do a nice clean wash. Now this easel is big enough for me to put the largest paper that I like to work with. This is about 20 by 14. So as you can see, this easel is big enough for that. And I like to paint on watercolor blocks. So even though this paper is a little bit taller than the easel, I can still paint with ease. Now lighting is very important, probably one of the most important equipment you can get. This is 5 LED. I did a video on this specific light on my channel before. I used to have a black one and the black one I gave it to my son, so I got an exact same model. But this one is a white one, which I think it fits the space a little bit better. This is a very nice, sturdy, beautiful light. It clamps on the back of my desk. And you can turn it on and off like so very easily. This is nice and bright. As you can see, it's a huge LED strip with a nice diffuser, so I can see the lighting very nice and evenly. And the most important thing is that this light has a correct temperature that I like to work with. You can change the color temperature like so. Having the right lighting temperature is very important. If you have a light that is too warm, as you can see, the color is completely changed. And if you're painting with this sort of lighting, your judgment for the color will be off. You're desperately trying to compensate for the warm light by mixing very cool color. So it's very important that you have a nice, accurate lighting. Right now, this painting is under 6500 Kelvin, which is close to the outside skylight. and it is very nice to look at, and you'll be able to judge the color much more accurately. So very important to have a good lighting with accurate color and nice and bright, and also a huge light that you can lit your painting evenly. Now on the side here, here's my palette and my water bucket and my paintbrush. And over here, these are two compartments for extra brushes, which I rarely use, and some other tools like rulers, pencil, and palette knife, and so on. And these boxes, I got those from Daiso, which is kind of like a dollar store, a little bit better than a dollar store. And I got those cardboard boxes, and I just used a double-sized stick tape, like a very strong one, to stick on the wall, so I can access them very easily and they don't take up much space. Over here, I have the paper towel. I installed a paper towel holder here, so when I'm sitting here painting, I can grab one very easily. I got my pencil, eraser, and stuff here, and underneath here, I mount a hair dryer here, so that when I am painting and I want to speed up the drying process, I will be able to use that right away. Now, when I'm painting, I want to be able to see my reference very easily. Now, my painting area is very close to my computer, so all I need to do is to rotate the monitor like so. So whenever I sit here and paint, I will be able to look at my reference very easily. I can also check my camera and my live stream setting and things like that. But if you're not recording video, that's totally fine. These are the controller for the cameras and the live stream, so you don't have to worry about that. And down here, I installed a clamp tray so that I can move my mouse and keyboard here when I need to use the computer when I'm sitting here. Lastly, I have a stool here, so I sit on it when I'm painting. It is not a big stool, so it doesn't take up that much space. It has a wheel on it, so I can pull back a little bit and look at the painting as a whole. So that is it for my painting area and my equipment and setup. So as you can see, these are not very complicated. You can set this up very easily. Again, the most important thing is not to have a big and fancy place, but to have a dedicated area. So when you turn on the light, you are ready to go. Your materials are here, your equipment are all set up, and you set them up in a way that you can paint comfortably and easily. And now let's look at the materials and the tools I use for my painting. So now that you know how I set up the space, let's take a look at the material I use. The material I use are my personal preference. I haven't tried every material that's out there. If you find something that works for you, by all means, keep using them. But if you are a student of mine or you want to follow one of my painting demos or tutorials, I do recommend you try the materials I have to have a similar result and take some guesswork out of the painting. So without further ado, let's take a look at my materials. Okay, so let's take a look at all the material that I use. First of all, the paper, which is probably the most important thing for a painting. Now you can use cheap paper if you are practicing or if you're just doodling, which is fine. But if you want to paint a serious painting, a good paper is very important. The paper that I use for probably 90% of the time is Baohong, which is a Chinese brand watercolor paper. Now you can use any paper you want, you can use any paper that feels good for you, but for the most part I use Baohong paper and I use cold press. It has enough texture for me to create some dry brush marks and create some interesting textures, but it is also not too rough. It absorbs and holds up water and paint very well. The color shows up great on this paper. Usually when you use a cheaper paper, it might not able to hold that much wet wash, or the color doesn't show up that well, and Baohong does well on both. Most of the time I paint in block. So what watercolor block is that it glues on the side and it's on a very thick, sturdy cardboard. So I don't need additional board. I don't need to tape on the board when I'm painting those. And as you can see, when I'm done with the painting, I want to get the painting out. I just stick a palette knife on top of it and just run it through, and I will be able to get the paper off the watercolor pad. And this is great because when you're done with the painting and the paper is still kind of wet, the paper can warp. So when you paint on a pad, you can wait for it to be completely dry, and because it's glued on all four sides, the paper will flatten itself back. So when you detach the painting, you will have a nice flat paper. So I work with various sizes, and I don't like to paint too big because it's very tiring and requires a lot of details to hold up. The size that I like the most is 16 by 12. Most of my painting is around this size, and if I'm giving demo or I just want to paint something a little bit smaller, it's usually 14 by 10. And there are times that I want to work bigger, and in that case I will use 20 by 14. And that's probably the biggest size that I will work with. Sometime I do go up to 18 by 24, but rarely. Okay, on to the right hand side. I'm a right hander, so I put all of my palette, brush, and buckets on the right hand side. This is John Pike palette. This is an excellent watercolor palette. It's made with plastic, and as you can see, it has a nice deep big well for your paint and have a large mixing area, which is great if you want to make big washes and mix a lot of colors. This is great. I do wish to have a little bit of division in the middle so I can have warm and cool, but for the most part this is very useful. I can mix a pile here and maybe another pool here. My water bucket, I have two. This is for washing my brushes, and this is usually for cleaner water if I want to do some like clean wet onto wet, soften edges and things like that. This water bucket was a gift from Mission Gold when I was testing out their paint. They sent me this wonderful bucket. This water bucket can collapse. I never really collapse it because I don't really take it outside the studio. The handle of the bucket is great. It have this little notch. I am able to put my brushes on it and they are very stable. So all of the brush that I use are laid out there so I can take the brushes very easily. I have a dirty rag down here because whenever I paint, when there is too much water, I can use this rag to dry my brush a little bit so that I can control the wetness very easily. I don't really use paper towel for that because I will be going through a lot of paper towels and then it'll be a waste. And also paper towel is very absorbent, so if I use paper towel instead of a rag, it will pretty much suck all of the water out of my brush, and I don't really want that. I still want some moisture, good amount of moisture in my brush. So that's what the rag is, and you don't need to get like an extra rag for that, maybe some old towels or something. You can just cut it up and use that. Okay, and underneath my palette, these are my pencils. I will go over them a little bit later. I have a spray bottle, which is great if I want to spray on my paint a little bit to revive them. And I can also spray on my painting if I want to keep them moist a little bit longer. So I have two pencils that I use. This is a technical pencil, this is a mechanical pencil, and as you can see, the lid for the technical pencil is very dull, it's very thick, and the mechanical pencil, the lid is very thin, so I can do more accurate drawing with this. Both of the lead are 4B. So this is the lead that I use. As you can see, this is 4B, is 0.5. So when you're getting a mechanical pencil, make sure you're getting a lead that this pencil can use. Don't get a 0.7mm lead when you are using a 0.5mm mechanical pencil. That's not going to fit, and vice versa. This is a kneaded eraser, so I can kind of shape it and I can form it. If I want to erase just a little bit of an area, I can kind of shape it so there's only a little bit of point. The best thing about this eraser is that it's not going to create any sort of a dust here, so it's very easy for me to just go over and erase the pencil line. And as long as you don't draw very hard, it should be very easy to get the pencil line off with this eraser. So I'll just do like a very light line like so, but because I didn't draw too hard, I can get rid of it very easily. So this is what I use to erase. Now, there are cases that when I draw a little bit hard on the paper, then I will need to use like a regular eraser to get that. But as you can see, you can start to get some of this dust from the eraser that you don't want. Okay, so this is another thing that I occasionally use. This is masking fluid. This is like a pen-shaped masking fluid from Schmincke, and I use this occasionally to mask out some little bits of highlight so that I don't need to paint around very small shapes, so I can focus on making big washes. So definitely very useful thing here that I use sometime. Okay, so let's talk about brushes. Now, despite I got quite a few brushes throughout the years, I now stick with just 5 brushes. These are my signature brushes by Craftable. There are 5 brushes inside this brush set. I highly recommend these brushes not just because it is my signature brush, but also I work really hard with Craftable to get them into spec. So these are the brushes that I actually use pretty much 99% of the time for my paintings. Okay, so this brush set is brand new. I haven't taken them out, so I'm just going to put them onto the side and show you the one that I've used. Okay, so these are the brushes that I am currently using. So you can see a little bit of wear and tear. I've been using them for about half a year, and they're still holding very strong, especially after you get some water on the brush. They start to form very nice and fine point. Okay, so when you get the brush, you'll be able to see the brush size, what type of brush is it, and my signature and the Craftable brand name. All these brushes are synthetic hair, but to me they work just as well as animal hair brush. Anyways, these 2 dark hair brushes, these are the mop brush. They are similar to a squirrel hair brush. They can make really big wash very easily. They soak up a lot of water, and it has very nice fine points. So if you're doing a big wash and you need to paint around a certain area, these 2 brushes are great for that. We have like a very big mop brush for the big area, and this number 14 brush are for a little bit smaller area wash. And this one, this brown hair brush, this is number 12 round. This is great for foliages, trees, vegetations, any of a soft shape. The hair is a little bit softer, so it is great for wet onto wet wash. So you can do wet onto wet without pushing down too hard. It's going to be very easy on the paper. So this is really great for that. I use this brush a lot. And finally, this number 10 brush and this number 6 brush. These 2 brushes are the detail brush, I would like to say. So this number 10 brush, so both of these brush, their hairs are a little bit snappier, as you can see. So these are great for hard surface stuff such as car, boat, buildings, details, and things like that. And I usually use them at maybe a little bit later stage in my painting. And this is the detail brush. This is the smallest brush I have. If I need to go any smaller, I'll just use the tip of the brush. This is great for detail and smaller figures on a street scene and things like that. So these 5 brushes are the brushes that I use 99% of the time. They are still in stock at the time of this video, so if you're interested, check it out. It's much cheaper to just get it from the whole package than buying individual brushes. Before, I used brushes like Escoda, which is really great as well. I love these brushes. These are very similar, so when I'm working with Craftable, I gave them Escoda as my example and the bar actually. So they were able to deliver something very similar, and I actually like the handle a lot better. I like the matte finish. It feels better and look better. So I still recommend Escoda brushes. They are very good brushes, but the brush set is much cheaper this way, and if it is still in stock, definitely check it out. Okay, so let's talk about the colors and the paint that I use. Now you see quite a few colors on it, but I can honestly tell you there are a few colors that I rarely use. So I lay out my palette from cool to warm, and there's some of the earth tone and some greens here. Now I do use different brands of paint, so this is a little bit mixed match. I use Daniel Smith's, Mission Gold, and My Mary Blue. All of them are pretty good brand. You just need to watch out for the color that you're picking. I will explain that a little bit later. But here are the color that I use. This is Cerulean Blue, Cobalt Blue, Ultramarine Blue, Alizarin Crimson, Carmine. This is Cobalt Black from Mission Gold. These two are experimental colors that I had. I squeezed them there and I never used them, so they are just there. This is Cadmium Red Hue. This is Cadmium Orange Hue. Hansen Yellow Deep. Cadmium Yellow Medium Hue. This is Yellow Ochre. This is Raw Sienna, which I rarely use because it got this green shade that I don't really like. This is just White Gouache, and I use that sometime when I need a little bit of light. This is Neutral Tint. This is Burnt Sienna, Burnt Umber, Cobalt Turquoise, Cobalt Turquoise Light, and this is Cerulean Blue from Mission Gold, and I think in most other brands they are Phthalo Blue. So all this color, I squeeze them out and I just let them dry. So I don't really use pen watercolor because when the tube color they squeeze out and they're dry, they're pretty much acting as a pen watercolor. Now the reason I let them dry is because a fresh new paint squeeze out is very strong and it's very easy to just pick out a little bit too much. So you are actually wasting a little bit of paint if you are having a very strong paint. So when it is dry, all you really need to do is to just grab a little bit of water and work it out a little bit. Maybe a little bit more water. Just do that and you can revive the paint very easily. Okay, so by doing that, you are not going to run into the risk of grabbing a fresh new paint that is too strong. So this is the way that I prefer to paint. I usually don't like the paint when it's too saturated, too strong. Leaving them dry is actually a good way for me to keep it a little bit more in control. Now, one thing you need to be careful is that the name of the color can be different among different brands. So for example, Cobalt Turquoise, which is this color right here, is called Cobalt Turquoise with Daniel Smith's paint. But for Mission Gold, it's actually called Cobalt Green Deep. You can actually find a Cobalt Turquoise in Mission Gold paint, but the color is actually different. So the way we can pick the right paint so we don't get the wrong color is to look at the pigment code. So this is PB36. This is Cobalt Turquoise for Daniel Smith. And over here, despite it says Cobalt Green Deep, it is actually PB36 as well. So these two are actually the same color despite that they have different name. So this can happen depends on the brand of paint you are buying. So Cobalt Blue for Daniel Smith is actually Cobalt Blue number 2 for Mission Gold and Cobalt Blue Light for My Mary Blue. So be sure to look at the pigment code so you don't get the wrong color. In the materials list that I provide, I will be including the pigment code so you will be able to pick out the right paint and the right color. So that's my setup and my material. I put together a list and links to purchase them if you are interested. Check out the description down below. Once again, happy 2024. Maybe your year started great, or maybe you had a rough start and things don't look so good for you. But no matter what, I wish you a wonderful year ahead of you. Even though things in this world might not look so bright, we can still choose to be happy, be kind, and gentle to the people around us. Let's create more art in this world that brings joy to others. I'm Eric from Cafe Watercolor. See you again soon.